Okay, let me introduce the first speaker. It's Mr. Kari Herlevi from the Finnish Innovation Fund, SITRA. He's a project director of the circular economy activities at SITRA. Please, Kari.
Thank you, Johan. Great to be here in Sweden. Thanks a lot for the invitation. So, my name is Kari Herlevi and I lead the circular economy area at SITRA, and it's been an exciting road for us. We have been working in the area for 3 years now, and I will tell some of the results so far, although it's a long way, as we know, to transform things in a circular fashion. The basic idea why we started the work is to really think about how to decouple the economic growth from the use of natural resources and decouple it from the pollution as well, and from the emissions. But also from the whole SITRA's point of view is the idea is really to decouple the perceived well-being from the economic growth as well, since we know that there are many other measurements than GDP, for example. And we can do it with, for example, with circular economy as a tool. So it's not the end goal for our work as such. And we see, like in many Nordic countries, that digital tools is way to do it in many ways. And small countries have a say in global markets to show the way, as Sweden and Finland have done many other areas, like in telecommunication in many years and decades. And when I think when we started the work, we started the work with McKinsey, and we mapped the kind of efficiencies we see in the industries and different areas, and there were so many of them that it's not even possible to put them all here. But many materials are still used only once in Europe, and there are inefficiencies in construction, but there's also inefficiencies in how we use transportation or cars or office spaces, and so it's not only about the material things, but it's more about the kind of mental thinking, how to be more efficient. But it's not only about resource efficiency from our point of view, it's much more than that, and I will come to that. And of course we know that the population growth is growing, and there's a lot of needs for more materials and farmland, etc. But and things have to be done different way. The kind of, if you think about where the value chains are and what are the kind of where the consumer's money is, that's another story. And there we can say that most of the resources are in transportation, food, and built environment. And these are the areas that we see the opportunities as well, and we are focusing quite heavily on these aspects currently. But of course, they are kind of areas that many companies and policymakers and cities are focusing, and for that reason we have also kind of tried to narrow down circular economy in certain themes or kind of aspects, since it's a very broad thematic. It's not like a certain substance area as such. It's a horizontal activity, and this is the way we see it from our point of view. And I was yesterday in Brussels. There's this kind of European stakeholder group that is now starting to work. One of the main things, once again, was how to define circular economy, and that's of course important. But for us, it's more about the kind of which direction to take and what kind of tools can we use. And from SITRA's point of view, we are talking about system and digital and service-based circular economy. So it's not certainly only about materials and how they are recycled, for example. I think in many consumers and citizen level, when you ask about circular economy, they are still saying recycling economy, which it isn't at all. For our work, we also mapped a little bit, not in a very profound way, but still try to understand where are the kind of countries that are moving ahead in circular economy. And this is just a snapshot of that, but Sweden was there already before I was invited here, so it was objective work we did. And we saw that the electronic waste recycling was one of the key areas, but of course we know there have been many people from Sweden to discuss with us, so we know there's much more than that. Japan is also interesting in many ways. The kind of resource efficiency side of the island, of course, is interesting for decades, and Netherlands, of course, has been a forerunner for some time. But we also see that this is picking up outside of Europe. It started, of course, from Ellen MacArthur Foundation's studies, but we know that from Latin America is really excited about this, and also in many other parts as well. So it's a kind of a global movement, you could say, at the moment. I will not bore you with these figures and how they are calculated, but any figure you take, it's a big one, and of course that is also a challenge, because how to really narrow down to everyday practical business case example is the kind of thing that you need to do. But of course it's good to kind of try to figure out what are the markets and how you can approach that. From our point of view, we went from there to this. We did a study with McKinsey about the business opportunities in certain sectors for Finland, and it's still kind of fresh, even though it's like 4 or 5 years old already. There are very good examples from food waste to they actually list here from different areas. And one of the kind of construction sector, for example, it wasn't about the kind of waste produced from the construction itself. It was more about how to transform office spaces to living environments, to houses, and what kind of regulation is hindering that kind of approach, and what kind of value is locked in that kind of very rigid system that, for example, Helsinki metropolitan area has. So it was a bit different type of thinking, and we are still quite proud of it, because it also talks the language of CEOs about the kind of business opportunities. Then when we think about policy side, it's about jobs and growth, and there we need to take a different angle, and this is one study from UK where they just showed that the landfilling, of course, in Europe is already behind in many countries, but when you go outside of Europe, it's even difficult to get them into the landfills. They are in some dump sites or whatever in Brazil, so the things are a bit different there, and of course globally, when you think about these solutions, if you try to sell robots recycling systems in Brazil, they will say no thanks, because they have jobs that they have to provide for low educated people. But in Europe, when you go beyond reuse, remanufacturing, you get more and more interesting job opportunities, and that's what we also try to promote with the work we have been doing. For interest time, I don't go through these different kind of challenges that we have seen from the kind of policy perspective, but you will get the presentation later on, you can have a look of that. But I would say that the policy side is challenging in Europe anyway. It's difficult to get very concrete actions that will drive towards circular economy, as it's very horizontal, and many things I think at the moment is being able to done already without strong policy measures. But there are some things that should be changed for sure. Then about the roadmap, briefly, so we launched 2016 globally first national roadmap for nation in Finland, and it was an interesting job to do. We saw that it's not only to kind of provide funding or work with certain partners. We needed to have a holistic view of Finland and what to do in Finland in anyhow. And there we kind of we were thinking about, of course, the kind of economic opportunity as well, since it's a circular economy, but also the environment perspective, and then again that maybe the Nordic countries could be a home base for references like in telecommunication sector as well. And of course the government was already backing this, but maybe from the quite narrow point of view, from the kind of nutrient recycling, and we saw that it's like a combining of technical cycles and biological cycles together, and have a much more holistic view. And I think we are in a good road right now, and I will tell you a little bit about the progress that we have done. But the basic idea there was to kind of start from kind of bottom up, since many strategies have been done in Finland. I think Nordics are quite good in, presenting papers, but should be also execute some of them. And that was the mentality that we wanted to embrace here, to really start from the actions and then go hopefully to more like growth market approaches. We had 4 months time. We had around 1,000 people involved. We got 250 ideas, and we got 66 actions in the roadmap. And it was very interactive, and I think that was one positive thing, that people could actually influence the process. So it was not like a cabinet paper that many times they are. And another important thing was that we found out the focus areas for Finland. Basically, you could say that we are focusing in food, forest-based loops, technical loops, and transport and logistics, and common actions, which are more like horizontal things like R&D, education, different type of horizontal actions beyond that. And if I think about the results so far, we did a kind of international evaluation of the roadmap, and actually the main message was that start from the next generation. So focus on the educational sector and early on as possible. And we have now invested in the first year around 3.5 million euro, which is a lot from our perspective, to different projects from kindergarten to universities. And around 70,000 students will learn about circular economy, not as a separate topic, but as integrated in the existing curriculum of Finnish education system. So it's promising, but we don't know the results, of course, yet. But there is like 1,500 elementary schools involved, 50 high schools, tens of universities, and all the way from business to material sciences to arts, everything basically. And we are very, very positive about it, but let's see how it goes. But that's not only one example. So we've been busy to find out other projects, flagship projects, and some of them are now focused in technical loops, where we are talking with the construction sector about very holistic view of how to change the things I mentioned already before, the material losses, and how to think from scratch together with cities when they are kind of building new areas in the towns, how to take care that they are thinking beyond 5 to 10 years, and maybe how the transportation system will change, and maybe we don't need that many cars or parking space in the roads or garages. So really try to change the existing system. And then we have also projects that are focusing on, for example, how to take valuable metals, rare earth metals, out of electronics, and it's in the patent phase right now, and there's an industry building on top of that. So that's just some examples what we are doing, but certainly it's exciting times, and many companies are working in the area right now. Kind of put it in two perspectives, the policy actions and then the kind of pilot projects, and there are many, as said already. Maybe one additional thing to mention from the list is that we want to also challenge the municipalities. We have been working quite a lot with industry right now, but cities and municipalities are in a key role as well. So how to kind of engage them as a platform, and from public procurement perspective, for example, to integrate circular economy in their purchasing power, and that's the next step that we are launching in coming weeks, how to do that together with cities, for example. But maybe from the practical point of view also, it's good to remember that you need to have some kind of role models, and we decided that we will make a most interesting company list of Finnish circular economy companies, and we started that work, was it 2 years ago or so, and we thought that for the anniversary of Finland, which is this year, 100 years, we will have 100 companies in the list. We are almost there. There's around 90 or so in the list, and it has been very fascinating because companies are fighting to get to the list for different reasons maybe, but at least they see this as very relevant. So we decided to have 5 kind of focus areas from the business model point of view, from product life extension to recycling and everything in between. And it has been quite good tool for us. And there are many companies that you can actually look from our website. They are in English, not in Swedish, unfortunately, but they are kind of more opened more the kind of situation, and companies actually can compare, even though they are in different business areas. They can learn from the other examples. So I'm not going to go through these, but you can check them online. Then about the kind of global view, because we wanted to engage in a global discussion, and we were thinking how to do that, and we came up with an idea to invite all the relevant global key decision makers in circular economy to Finland for World Circular Economy Forum. So it was an experiment, and it was a very, very interesting road. We invited different international partners, from European Commission to Anna MacArthur Foundation, United Nations, and what happened was that there was around 1,600 people in Helsinki in June. There was 1,000 people in the queue list, and it was a massive and exciting experiment for us. And this will actually continue, since there was 100 countries represented. This will continue next year in Tokyo. So Japan will take the lead and host the next one in October. So if you are interested, just let me know about the event and your interest. And maybe as a kind of last point, I want to leave some time for questions. I show one video of our experiment so far.
Finland is a small and agile nation, therefore it's a great testing ground for getting massive new ideas. A year ago, we here at the Finnish Innovation Fund SITRA put together a roadmap. It's first of its kind and it looks like this. Yes, the map's a circle, because it's a map to almost infinite opportunities, a map to a circular economy. In 1 year, it has led us to discover sustainable innovations in all sorts of places and industries in Finland. Have a look. We have entrepreneurs who turn rags and worn clothes into fancy new garments. We are introduced to new vegan food innovations all the time, and several restaurants serve gourmet dinners made out of waste food. Then there is this guy who thought, hey, I'm gonna sell light, and actually made it work. It's called Lighting as a Service, and it's based on the same business idea as shared cars. We also have those in Finland. But it's not only small business owners who are getting it here in Finland. Heavy industries in the Arctic are closing the loop on millions of tons of raw material. This is now being replicated all over the country. For the World Circular Economy Forum 2017, SITRA gathered the most recognized experts and decision makers from 100 countries around the same table. It was a large table, I assure you. And the greatest change is yet to come. At SITRA, we're on a mission to train half of Finnish teenagers to become circular economy natives. Yep, we just made up that word. Feel free to copy it. And please have the map too. Really, we insist. It's a freebie worth billions, and that's not even a lie. Even though we Finns are a crazy bunch, we are honest. Like officially. Future is made together.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Kari. We have time for questions, and we have 2 microphones. So please, if you have questions to Kari. Yes?
Tatjana from RISE Research Institutes of Sweden. I wonder if you measure circularity in any way. There are so many different companies, so many business models. How do you understand whether it's profitable, whether it's sustainable, how circular? Is it very circular, little circular?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's of course different levels to measure things, and usually at SITRA we measure impact of our activities, but that's a kind of own science itself, how to impact our activities in circular economy as a whole. Then there's the other level, which is the kind of roadmap and the activities that are included there, and that's maybe like operational metrics. But then when you go down deep and deeper, it gets much more complicated, of course, and there we are kind of, for example, in the company list, it's you could say that it's really almost impossible to kind of define that. So it's our view that is what is interesting and what is inspiring, and not like a very research-oriented view based on certain metrics as such. But of course, there's a that's a kind of also difficulty when you don't have exact metrics. Like in European Union, they are this year kind of coming up with metrics, but it's more like macro level things and maybe like waste, recycle kind of focused. And we don't want to focus only on recycling. We want to kind of see the actions that are preventing of having recycled materials, so more like services, etc. So my kind of short answer is here that we don't have that kind of metrics that you could say that what is more circular than others, but it's more the direction that and the leadership we want to show.
Okay. Any other questions?
It was an interesting talk. I just wondered, how do you get companies to change their behavior? For example, on the film, there was a textile recycling company. Do you have to does the Finnish government have to offer financial incentives, or do people just suddenly wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to start a textile recycling company? How does it happen?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I don't know how it does happen, but I many times ask, like there are very exciting examples when they really change the core business model of the company, and nobody knows who started it. Usually, it's like some kind of collaboration and the ideas coming from here and there. But I think what is interesting is that you have to have the leaders that are interested in and support that kind of activity, so that they are not at least, you know, hindrance for the development. So that's an important part of it. But that's a kind of research area of its own, how to do that. But we have been seeing that companies experiment. Of course, they usually are smaller first and just try to learn from that experience. But there are companies like a very big one that have actually created totally new business, which is actually against their existing business. And that's, I think, it's an interesting area that you could change that. And some of them are actually financing from the kind of maybe fossil-based business, the kind of new development. And I think that's a road that should be followed by many others.
Okay. Thank you. Any additional question before we close this presentation? Okay. If not, thank you very much, Kari.
Thanks.